Well, I'm delighted to say we're now joined by William Dartmouth, who's the member of the European Parliament for the South West. Am I right in saying that?
Yes, for the South West and Gibraltar.
And Gibraltar, of course. So, could you start by telling us a bit about what that work involves and why you're an MEP for a party that opposes the European Union itself?
Well, I think that those are two questions rather than one. So which one would you like
Let's
me to
go
start
for the first one. Let's have the introduction first.
Exactly. I represent the southwest of England, which I prefer to use the phrase the southwest counties.
Okay.
Which are Devon, Cornwall, Somerset, Dorset, Gloucestershire and Wiltshire, because I disapprove of regionalisation. It's physically the largest MEP region. As you probably know, MEPs represent regions. It's physically the largest. It's bigger than Wales, not as big as Scotland, and it has a population of about 5.3 million people. It's widely variegated and includes, in my view, but perhaps I'm rather biased, the most beautiful parts of England. It's a great privilege to be doing it. It's quite a hard slog, but sometimes you can make a bit of a difference.
So let's touch on the note that you represent then southwest of England and Gibraltar in the European Parliament, but you are a member of a party, of UKIP, who want to get us out of that institution. So how does that weigh up? Do people recognise and understand that? Or are there concerns there that you're sort of being a bit self-contradictory?
Well, I think I answer this question in two ways. First of all, I think most people know that the UK Independence Party stands for Britain leaving the European Union. Yeah. Over 2.5 million people voted for the UK Independence Party in the last European election. Now, this question only comes up from political commentators and political journalists. I'm going to ask you a question in a moment, which is that, have you ever asked this question to a Scottish Nationalist MP? Have you ever asked this question to a Welsh Nationalist MP? Have you ever seen the BBC, a BBC interviewer, ask this question to a Scottish Nationalist or Welsh Nationalist MP as a matter of interest?
I haven't.
And if not, why not?
Yeah. I
mean, Alex Salmond, who is First Minister of Scotland and believes in Scottish independence, and believes that Scotland should completely break away from the United Kingdom, which is very, very clear. He was a Westminster MP since, I can't even remember now, I think it was 1987, until very, very recently. He's never been asked that question. The Welsh Nationalists are never asked that question. And so this is a question which is only asked of UKIP. And the fact of the matter is, of course, there are separatist parties. I did a count of the number of separatist parties that there are in the countries of Europe represented in national parliaments, and the figure is something like 11 or something. And all those people and all those voters think it is perfectly coherent and credible position to be elected to an institution which you basically want to withdraw from.
But you would rather not be a member of the European Parliament come 2014?
Well, every UKIP MEP, unlike professional politicians of the establishment parties who want to perpetuate their jobs, we're all working flat out to do ourselves out of a job. Now, I think that's highly estimable, actually, and the electorate think it's highly estimable. There's just a few commentators who insist upon asking what is, with respect, a highly hackneyed question, actually, which has got no intellectual validity at all.
Let's move on from that then and talk about UKIP's aims and ambitions. Will you yourself consider standing in a general election in this country?
Well, would I consider? Yes.
In 2015 then, perhaps?
Would I consider it? Yes, I would.
Right. And you can stand for both?
Yes. You can stand. The rule is you can't have a dual mandate. Yeah. And that's quite a new rule.
But you'd obviously prefer to be a member of Parliament.
It's a very good example. Actually, the name carries huge connotations, but Dr. Ian Paisley was for many, many years both an MP and an MEP. And they cut out what's called the dual mandate. So what the rule is that you can be an MEP, or for that matter, an MP, but you can't be both.
Yes.
But it follows that you can perfectly well stand, and you only have to resign from one or the other if you get elected.
So perhaps that's something you're considering yourself then?
Well, I'm considering something in 2015, but in the meantime, we've got some very important European elections coming up in 2014.
Absolutely.
So being a bit of an old timer, I think I'm really thinking about those more
and
at the moment.
UKIP can win those elections, your leader has said. Would you say that as well? Would you share that view?
Yes, I mean, we're on track to be number one in the European election.
How do you make sure you see that through?
Well, that's very. Of course, you can't make sure of it. Politics is a highly uncertain business.
Yeah.
So there's no way of making sure about it. But the thing is that we have to be coherent. We have to be credible as a political party, and not make many mistakes. But I mean, we are in political terms. UKIP was only founded in 1994, so we're in political terms complete newcomers on the block compared with the Conservative and Labour parties, even the Liberal Democrats. So for people to be even saying that we might come number one, which is what many, perhaps even most commentators predict, is absolutely astonishing, and it shows two things. One is that the establishment parties have failed, and secondly that they haven't been straight with the British people about many things, and especially Europe, especially our relationship with the European Union.
So in 1974, you stood as a Conservative Party candidate in a general election. So first of all, what sort of made you associate yourself with the Tories, and then why did you change alliances to UKIP after that?
Well, I've said it on several platforms and several times, and Tony Blair said it actually, to give full acknowledgement to the phrase, but the fact remains completely valid, which was I was born into the Conservative Party, but I chose the UK Independence Party. Now, I've got some excuse for standing for the Conservative Party in 1974, because that was 20 years before the UK Independence Party was even founded.
Yes.
The UK Independence Party was founded in 1994, as you probably know.
So, in 74 then, when you stood for the Tories, there was no question of, I disagree with quite a few of their policies here. But
yes, but they weren't. But our relationship with the then common market, which we'd only gone into in 1973.
Yeah. Our
relationship with the then common market wasn't a principal issue. The principal issue at that time was inflation. I actually stood in February 74, which in fact was the miners' election, and I was actually standing in a mining constituency, which was Lee in Lancashire, as it happens.
Right.
And I subsequently stood for Stockport South in October 74.
Yes.
Also as a Conservative. So it wasn't a huge issue. What was an issue was whether we should have a referendum or not. And Harold Wilson produced a referendum in 1975. In a way, it's horribly reminiscent of what David Cameron is proposing now, because Harold Wilson went to Brussels, said, I've renegotiated the terms, I've improved the terms, and now we're going to have a referendum. In fact, his renegotiated just didn't amount to anything at all. And I think that's what's going to happen with Cameron.
A very contemporary political issue right now is that of Syria and military intervention there. What is UKIP's policy on Syria? Well, I know what it is.
We're absolutely opposed to military intervention in Syria. Why? It's going to do more harm than good. We as a country can't afford it. It's open to question if the military capability is there after the massive cuts put through by David Cameron. I mean, the coalition government's policy, cheered on by the Labour Party, is to have a 40% increase in the foreign aid budget, whereas at the same time having massive cuts in the resources of our defence and armed forces. And it's likely to cause untold misery and compound the misery that's already there.
The US claim there is proof, though, of chemical weapons being used.
Well, they haven't produced the proof, and I think we've heard US presidents say that they have proof of chemical weapons before.
If there was, as they say, undeniable proof, and Parliament conclude that there is, and perhaps UKIP then accept there is, would that change UKIP's position on military intervention there? Well,
I think at this stage I'm only speaking for myself, but I think it's not our job as a country to seek to police the world. It may have been, but it isn't now.
That links quite well, I think, into foreign aid then and UKIP's policy on that. Would that, again, be drastically cut if you...
Drastically cut, absolutely. We know that most of the foreign aid budget is wasted. The wastage is compounded because the government has insisted that it be increased by 40%. If somebody says, look, we're increasing your budget by 40%, what are you going to do? You're basically going to spend more. I'm a qualified chartered accountant, and there's no satisfactory, what chartered accountants call, audit trail for big chunks of the expenditure, and it's simply a massive ego trip on behalf of the coalition government, totally at variance with the wishes of the British people. Libraries and nurses are cutting back, and we're giving foreign aid to Argentina. It's you couldn't make it up.
On a slightly different note, quite a lot of the general public, would you accept, see a lot of UKIP through the media, right? And UKIP's sort of success quite heavily depends on that portrayal in the media, is that right?
Well, I'm afraid I'm going to have to disagree with you. We actually get very little media coverage until very, very recently. I mean, I have lots of UKIP members saying to me, why didn't you say about this? Why didn't you say about that? Why didn't you say about this issue? And the answer is that I have and I do. But it's almost impossible to get any coverage.
So when you do get that coverage, isn't it vitally important to use it well? And for example, your members of party going around saying Bongo Bongo land, that can't be good for UKIP as
I mean, I'm not going to get into a dialogue about a senior, distinguished and accomplished colleague.
Right. Okay.
I didn't say it.
No, you didn't.
I think there's a slightly more profound point, actually, which is that many people in UKIP, including me, have been talking about foreign aid, saying it's a bad idea, saying it doesn't make any sense under the present circumstances, saying that the money is being wasted. We've been saying this for years. I mean, literally years and years and years and years. And certainly, and in particular particularly since the 2015 general election, when the foreign aid budget is not just ring-fenced, it's the 40% increase which is ring-fenced, whereas drastic cuts are going on elsewhere. And it's only when a phrase of the kind which you've mentioned is put across that the media take any interest.
Well, I only mentioned it because it was said.
It's really a question for the media, which is, why does the media only cover things if there's a phrase like that in the mix? I think that's the more interesting question with respect.
But they are worthy of being covered, are they not?
Yes, but my point has just been that it hasn't been covered.
Yeah.
I've sent out 20 press releases about foreign aid, about the waste in foreign aid, and to consider that last year government expenditure, the excess of government expenditure over receipts was the incredible figure of 118 billion sterling. So in that context, why on earth we're borrowing money to give away? These are the economics of the madhouse. Now, I and others have been saying this for 4 years, but the only way in which the media, and I mean the media collectively, will even cover this point is if the phrase which you've mentioned is used. So, actually not phrase, the noun which you've mentioned is used. That's really a question for the media, not for me.
So Bongo Bongo land, that was a mistake, but it was media hyped up.
It's not quite what I said. I said the issue is a very serious matter. As Stephen Glover wrote a full column in the Daily Mail, said, Godfrey Bloom is speaking for Britain on foreign aid, but the media refused to cover it. They only covered it when the noun Bongo Bongo land was used, which incidentally comes from a musical written in the 1950s, by the way. Sung by the late Danny Kaye. There's no reason you should have heard of him. And actually, the thrust of the song was, "I don't want to leave Bongo Bongo Land. It's much more fun," which is rather the rest. But the serious point, and I do revert to this, is that the question is for the media. The waste of money in foreign aid, the inappropriateness of giving massive amounts of borrowing money to give away to foreign countries when we're in the financial position that we're in, is a matter of huge public concern. But the media refuse to cover it and will only cover it when a noun like that is used. That, it seems to me, is the question.
And UKIP aren't only subject to that from the media. There are, would you accept, other political parties perhaps that don't get enough media coverage, and the media coverage that they do get maybe is only these lines that
most
don't
of the
come out.
coverage, it's getting a little bit better now, but when I first joined UKIP, most of the media coverage was designed to harass us, because basically it's the establishment parties and their hangers-on in the media trying to keep out a new vibrant incomer. It's a bit like certain kinds of business.
Right. On a different note, Nigel Farage's expenses have come under a lot of scrutiny recently. I think it was in a national newspaper that he'd claimed over £2 million in his role.
When I say let me clarify that, there's nothing to clarify. It's very simple. Every single MEP has allowances to spend on staff, on other people. They can't handle the money themselves. You never get to handle it, which is about 1.5 times what an MP gets. Now, I have the honour to represent 55 parliamentary constituencies, so my staff budget is about approximately 1.5 times what an MP gets, which is not unreasonable. Now, if you tot that up together, that comes over the period of time which Nigel Farage has been an MEP for, and he was elected in 1999. So you can work it out, that's 14 years. His collective staff budget would have been approaching £2 million. But every single other MEP, saints like Caroline Lucas, European fanatics like Andrew Duff, they have exactly the same expense thing. And this is a very good example of the way in which UKIP is harassed by the media. And this question came out. There was a meeting at Chatham House, which was held on Chatham House rules, which is, i.e., what's said there is confidential. There was a question asked by the disgraced Labour MP and former Minister for Europe, Dennis McShane, and he said, "How much has your expenditure been?" Which is staff expenses. It's money spent on staff, and it applies to every single other MEP. And this is a classic example of the harassment that the UK Independence Party suffers from the media.
On the expenses scandal then in this country, the parliamentary expenses scandal, was UKIP able to take a political stance or viewpoint on that, or was it not their place, seeing as they had no MPs?
Well, the expenses scandal, as you said, concerned only MPs. However, what happened in the 2009 European election, which I'm well aware of because I was a candidate, was that UKIP were doing very badly in the polls. It was predicted that we'd get about 7% of the national vote. We ended up with approximately 17% of the national vote. And what the Westminster expenses scandal, it was a Westminster expenses scandal, and as you said, UKIP has no MPs, so we weren't embroiled in any way and couldn't have been, did was that it caused the electorate to take a look at other parties apart from the establishment parties. So the Green vote, we actually went up by 10 points from what we were getting in the polls, and it wasn't, none of the commentators actually picked it up, but the Greens went up from 6%, which they polled in 1999, to 9%, which they polled in 2004. And other non-establishment parties also did very well, and that was really the effect of the expenses scandal.
If you could vote for any political party apart from UKIP in Britain, which one would it be?
I wouldn't vote.
If you had to. Can I press you on that? Can I be cheeky?
Do I want to move to Australia? Well, I think you'd have to move me to Australia, where voting is compulsory, and we'd be fined for not voting. I would spoil my ballot then. I would vote in UKIP.
Do you think voting should be compulsory in this country?
No.
So how then do we get more people involved in politics and current affairs? Because turnout has been going down and down.
Turnout has been going down because people are not keen on, are not enthusiastic about the establishment parties. Everybody has the right to vote, and they can choose not to use it. It'd be wholly this obsession with getting turnout. The turnout is down because people are unhappy with the Conservative, Labour and Liberal Democrat parties. That's why turnout is down.
It's not because people are apathetic towards politics as a whole.
This obsession, well, if they're not enthusiastic enough about anybody to go out to vote, to put it another way. But there's a very serious point here, which you've sort of pass by on, which is that this argument, like we've got to get the turnout, we've got to get the turnout up, has meant that the protections against voter fraud have mostly been abolished. And we have one of the most defective electoral rolls in the world. And it's completely, there's no identity checks at the time of voting. Impersonation is very easy. People can go on the electoral roll without signing in their own name and the rest. And this is an entirely phony effort, an invalid effort, I should say, to try and get turnout up. And the problem is not the electoral roll. The problem is, and we have no checks on postal voting. Yeah. Which makes the entire thing open to fraud, and the rationalisation for this is this thing about turnout. The voter turnout is down because people are not enthusiastic about anybody or enough political parties to go out and vote for them.
That's the only reason.
And that's their privilege. That's their privilege.
Yeah.
That's their privilege, and that's their right.
That's the only reason why turnout is down. Not because society now is failing to engage young people with current affairs and the governing of their everyday lives.
Political parties are failing to engage young people in current affairs. And it's not too surprising. Look what you've got. Look what you've got. I'm an Oxford graduate myself, but you've got 3 Oxford graduates. Actually, Clegg went to Cambridge. They're all the same.
Is first past the post a hindrance to any potential success in UKIP's future?
First past the post is a huge hindrance to any party trying to break into the system of the establishment parties.
And does UKIP have a favoured alternative?
I think we're in favour of something called Alternative Vote Plus, but in the Alternative Vote referendum, we were in favour of a yes vote on the Alternative Vote. And
do you think that there is potential for a change in voting systems in the future, in the foreseeable future, or do you think that referendum that you spoke of shut that door?
I think it makes it very difficult, but I mean, but the existing system works to the huge benefit of the Conservative and Labour parties, and they've got no reason to change them. Now, if you look at the sort of Labour fiefdoms. If you look at the Labour fiefdoms in the north of England and in South Wales, the proportion of the Labour vote has been going down, and the turnout has been going massively down. In the Welsh valleys, they used to turn out about 80% for completely safe Labour seats. Now they turn out about 60%. The Labour proportion of the vote, instead of being 80%, is probably down to 53, 54%.
Could UKIP be part of a government in 2015?
I think that's a question for Nigel Farage. It's not a question for me. This is way above my grade.
But everyone can speculate, can't they? And
actually, with respect to I'm the one person that I can't speculate because I'm an MEP. I'm a member of a party. Okay. I'm a member of a group. It's certainly a policy that I won't be determining.
Right. Finally, what has been the most rewarding part of your role as MEP in UKIP, and what has been the most difficult and challenging part?
As I alluded to earlier, there were 2 constituents who were in prison in Hungary, and by virtue of the representations that I and others made, they were released on bail. So I think that's the single thing I'm proudest of.
And what's been the least enjoyable part?
I think the least enjoyable part is simply watching all this legislation, which is destructive to British interests, being pushed through the European Parliament, and in many cases voted for by a majority of British MEPs.
William Dartmouth, we will leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. I do appreciate you talking to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.